Welcome, everybody. We're glad you're joining us this evening for our next in the Ask the Expert event. We are going to give everybody a few minutes just to get in and get situated. This is a presentation that Abby's going to do, so you don't actually have to have anything in front of you. She's going to give us all the tips of the trade. But in the meantime, we'll just give it a few minutes, and I'm going to go ahead and post Abby's website up for you guys so that you can have some time to write that down because it's got a lot of wonderful things on it. And we'll just start here in a minute. Okay. People will still be coming in, Abby, but that's all right. We want to thank Abby for joining us today. Abby Gibson is with us. Abby was born and raised in California, but her dad is from the UK. So growing up with cheese, which is my favorite, on the table for every meal, a wonderful idea, was not a foreign concept in her household. Her dad's love and passion for unique cheese, wine, and travel sparked her own curiosity for the foodie world outside of California. She visited Iowa in 2017 and she fought it, but she fell in love with the Midwest and decided to move here. She started One Board Gal as a passion project during the pandemic to avoid boredom because she couldn't travel. But her business has really flourished since then. Abby has a great website. I put it on there. It's called oneboardgal.com, where she shares her love for cheese through photos and posts and hopes to inspire others to feel a little more confident bringing a board to their next gathering. Thanks for lending us your expertise, Abby. I know we're all looking forward to learning how we can wow our family and friends with a great charcuterie board. So everybody, if you have questions as Abby goes through her presentation, please go ahead and put those in the chat. We will make sure to get them answered after Abby's presentation. So Abby, thank you for joining us.
Yes, thank you, Darla, and thank you for the team at Iowa PBS for inviting me to speak to you guys tonight. And also, thank you for everyone that's attending virtually. I know that this is a busy time, and I hope that if you're watching it live with us tonight or you're going to watch the recording, that some of these tips and tricks can help you this holiday season. And like Darla said, just feel a little bit more confident either when you're hosting in the kitchen or just for your own enjoyment when you are making a charcuterie board or plate, even for yourself. So, the structure for tonight, I will talk to you guys a little bit more about me. Darla, you kind of touched a little bit on my one board gal story. I'll kind of, give a little bit more detail about that. We'll get into some tips and tricks, and then we'll go through what I call my 5-step process for building a charcuterie board. And we'll open it at the end for question and answer. But please feel free to chat in some questions during. And then if we miss it during the presentation, we'll make sure we cover those at the end. So, like Darla mentioned, my dad is from the UK and my mom is from the Midwest. So, I grew up with cheese being a complete staple in our household. I remember from a very young age coming home from school, and probably most kids had maybe some apples or pretzels as snacks. We had blocks of cheese at our table. So, from a very young age, I just became what I like to call a curd nerd. And I might not know every single thing there is to know about cheese, but I am definitely very passionate about it. And I hope you guys are as well. If you're joining tonight, there must be some love for cheese there. And my cheese love runs very deep. When I was 20, I had the privilege of studying abroad in southern Spain. And even though I was 20 years old, that was kind of the first time I was introduced to prosciutto. So, southern Spain has a lot of charcuterie. They are known for hanging ham above restaurants when you walk in. And at the time, as a 20-year-old, I didn't really respect or really enjoy it as much as I do now, but I have grown to love it a lot more over the last couple of years. And like Darla also mentioned, I moved to Iowa, which is one of the greatest places for pork production. So, Iowa, I'm sure you guys are well aware, especially if you live in Iowa. I know there's a couple people joining from outside of Iowa, but Iowa is known for its pork production. So if you're not in love with charcuterie and meats and prosciutto, things like that, definitely you should give them a try. And you should definitely look for local charcuterie because there's tons of incredible options. One Board Gal specifically started during COVID. Like Darla mentioned, I was bored in my house. So I was a full time event planner. And then during COVID, unfortunately, all of my events stopped. So I found myself kind of in my house alone, playing around with different cheese and charcuterie. And this is kind of when I noticed, okay, this is really fun. And this is something that not only I enjoy, but I love, sharing the love and spreading, joy through dropping off little plates, whether I had a friend maybe celebrating a 30th birthday that again during COVID we couldn't really celebrate in person, but I knew, okay, this cheese board is something she might enjoy, dropping those off. And my brother actually was the one that had the idea, my brother Jack, and he said, hey, I think people would really get a kick and really enjoy these boards. So we built a website, and before I knew it, people were emailing me to do large corporate orders of like 1,000 charcuterie boxes. And then eventually, once weddings started happening again, I got an inquiry to do a 12-foot grazing table full of cheese and meats and breads and all the things. So that is something that I started doing, as well as workshops. So, really passionate about sharing my knowledge and what I know about cheese, hence our workshop tonight. And then I kind of got more into styled shoots. So, I started doing some work for some grocery stores, some pork producers, and that was a unique challenge because it's one thing, to make a board look really pretty, but also make it functional, right? So if you're taking a board to a party, for example, you want to be able to pick up that board and put it in the car while it's ready to go. And sometimes you see something in a magazine and you think, oh, this is great. Or Pinterest, oh, I want to create that. And oftentimes we go to create it and we realize, oh, wait, I actually can't even pick this up from my counter. So hopefully some of these tricks will be practical, whether you're a novice and you've never built a board before, or you're someone like me and you're a little bit of a curd nerd and you're wanting to get some more information about cheese, about meats, please just know my door is always open. You can send me an email at any time, and it'll take me maybe 1 or 2 days to get back to you. But I would be more than happy to answer kind of any questions that you have, whether it's what type of cheeses to select or what type of knives that I like to use. Please feel free to reach out and I will do my best to share my knowledge with you all. One thing I should also mention is recently, while I'm still doing some One Board Gal style photo shoots and things like that and workshops, they're a little bit on hold right now because I accepted a job last year in London. So this past year, I've been in London and it's been a really great experience for me just to get some education around different types of cheeses. And obviously, being so close to the mainland Europe, I've also had the opportunity to go and experience some cheeses in different regions. So, like I said, while the Midwest is amazing, we have great cows, we have great pigs for charcuterie. I've also really loved getting to try and sample cheeses from Europe. So that's something I'll talk a little bit about. And again, on my blog, oneboardgal.com, I sometimes go off and chat about those kind of things. So if that's something that interests you, please take a look at that. The first thing I will cover with you all is what is a charcuterie board? So it is a fancy word, it is a French word, and charcuterie simply means cured meats and cheeses put together on a platter, or sometimes a table, or sometimes a board. And what I love about charcuterie boards is you can really tailor them however you need. So, like I said, whether you're doing a massive grazing table for multiple people, or you want to do a themed charcuterie board for, let's say, a taco night, if you want to make a plate, a charcuterie plate for one, sometimes I eat that. It's called girl dinner. If you want to create an expensive charcuterie board, that's great. If you are looking to kind of create something a little bit on the cheaper side, we can chat about that tonight. And then the other thing I'll say is if you wanted to do a theme fully Iowa, you can find tons of cheeses and meats to make a charcuterie board with the Iowa theme. I would love to jump in now and just talk through my 5-step process. And if you have any questions, please feel free to chat those in. The first thing that I like to do when creating a charcuterie board is think about, what's the occasion? What's the party size going to be? How many days in advance am I going to be needing to create this to then serve? Is the party later tonight, or do I need to have something that maybe needs to be ready in a day or two that I need to have stored in my fridge, wrapped up nice and tightly? All of those things really impact how I'm going to choose what I'm going to create as far as picking out a board. So for me, this is an example of one of the boards that I have. And I really love this board for a couple reasons. The first thing I would say is it has handles, so it makes it very easy to serve, whether I'm just placing it down in my own kitchen or if I'm taking it to a friend's house or, giving it as a gift, it's easily transportable. So a lot of times I look for charcuterie boards that are less of a, I would say, cutting board material and more of a board that has a lip, especially if you like things like almonds or grapes. Those things can tend to slide off the board very easily. So having a board that's sturdy and has a nice lip, or in this case, even some handles to help you transport, is a win in my book.
Hey,
So today,
Abby,
yes.
um, what's your thoughts on there are some boards that already have preset um, little dishes. What is your take on that? Yes, no, do you like the board without better?
Yes. I mean, my first step after I select the board is kind of thinking about the ramekins. So if there are already some built-in ramekins, I think that's great. One of the reasons I would say that it's great is not everybody loves all of the items on the board. So for example, in my family, olives, we're a family of 4, we're completely split. So my mom and I, we love olives, where someone like my dad and my brother, they cannot stand them. So if you have a ramekin and you're able to put olives or maybe nuts, something like that separate, and it already comes with some ramekins installed in within the board, I think that's great.
Great, thanks.
Yeah, of course. And speaking of ramekins, while there are ones that are already on the board, I think it is kind of fun just to collect different sizes of ramekins. So I have this one here, and then you can see this one here that I have. It's a little bit more of a square. And then I have a smaller ramekin, this little baby one, that's great for this is mustard or jams, things like that. So for me, just having the variety and the flexibility of picking a different size depending on what I'm going to be serving, that's extremely helpful. So after step 1, selecting the board, the next thing, and in my opinion, the most important thing, is selecting the cheeses that you're going to be using. So I will talk a little bit about the cheeses and just cheese in general. And then I'll show you guys some of the cutting techniques that I like to use when I put together a board, whether it's a big board or a small board. So I'm just going to move some stuff right here. Great. I'm going to actually put some of these ramekins here. And the good thing, I guess, when the ramekins are free is you can move them around later. So if you're like me and you're not 100% sure where you want it quite yet, it's nice to have the flexibility to move them. So really fun tonight. I have quite a few different cheeses. And one thing I'll say about cheese before I jump in is there's actually 6 types of cheeses. So it depends a lot on the milk that is used. So we have cow's milk, sheep's milk, goat's milk. I'm sure you guys are familiar with buffalo mozzarella. That's actually from a buffalo. So a lot of people don't know that, but buffalo's milk is another one. We also have plant based cheese. So if you're vegan and you need maybe, let's say, a soy based cheese, that's an option, as well as camel's milk. That's maybe not popular here in the States. And then I also was reading earlier last week that they are coming up with donkey and pig milk based cheeses. So a little bit crazy if you're into trying unique and different foods. I can't say that I've personally tried camel or donkey or pig cheese yet, but that is something that they're starting to experiment with. And then, of course, there's always great combinations of cheeses. So sometimes you can get a sheep and a goat's cheese or a cow and a sheep. And really, those combinations just give the a little bit more flavor to the type of cheese. The other thing I'll say about cheeses, there's kind of a range. And when I go to the grocery store, this is the most important thing I think about when selecting cheeses. So I would look for a cheese maybe that's soft, a cheese that is semi soft, a cheese that is hard, and then a cheese that is very hard. So that different textures and those different flavors really will impact not only the flavor of the board, the texture, but also the cost. And I'll get into that in a little bit. Another thing I'll say about specific cheeses is there's an age range with cheese. So a lot of times on labels, they have the amount of months that a cheese may have been aged. So some cheeses might range from 3 months to 2 years. Whereas, like a mozzarella, if you live in Des Moines, Iowa, you can go down to Gateway and they make fresh mozzarella every single day. So that's a cheese that hasn't been aged, more than 12 hours, and you can get that fresh. I think for me, the longest cheese I've ever tried, it was a 5 year aged cheddar, and it was last Christmas, and I actually left it in my parents' fridge, kind of as a little test. We opened it, and obviously, I wouldn't recommend this. We didn't end up eating it. But if you think about blue cheese, again, one of those cheeses that you either love it or you hate it, the blue cheese is actually mold. So that's a cheese that's been aged to purposely have mold, which enhances that flavor and also the texture, of course. All right. And Darla, if you wouldn't mind just spotlighting the board down here, I can kind of talk a little bit about what cheeses I have selected.
You got it, Abby.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Okay. So the first cheese I selected, this one was really unique. And this is a caramel washed Gouda cheese. So this time of year, if you go in the grocery store, you might notice there's some really funky cheeses like this. And this cheese is great. It doesn't really need to be cut up. It's kind of just, hard. It's from Amsterdam. It's a really nice cheese. And so for me, when I see a cheese like this, I will basically just stick this one on the board itself, kind of in the corner, no cutting required, because I think it's just kind of a fun one. It still has its waxy shell on it. And then, sometimes you can put little toothpicks in with a little flag if people are curious what the cheese is. This one gratefully doesn't smell too much. Sometimes you can get these cheeses and you open them up, and especially when they've been aged for a couple months, they can really smell intense. But for me, this one caught my eye just because it was the caramel washed, and I had never seen anything like it. This next cheese that I have, again, similar to this caramel wash cheese, and these are a little bit fancier, and I'll kind of get into some basic cheeses here in a minute. But this one is a Toscano cheese, and it's actually soaked in Syrah. So if you're kind of a wino, or you like to try cheeses that are a little bit different, this one is really cool. And I think that just it being soaked is great. Now, similar to the Gouda, I think, you could potentially leave this as is, but to help guests be able to approach it and to try maybe just a piece, especially if maybe they aren't cheese lovers, I would actually suggest cutting it. And I typically use a pretty big knife. And when it's like a triangle like this, something that you can do is you can kind of just set it up. And what I like to do is, again, just thinking about if I was a guest at a party approaching this cheese board, how easy would it be to just grab a piece like this, right? And once, you can kind of cut these down, you can almost, I don't know if you can see it on this camera, but there's actually crystals in this cheese. And there's actually some liquid, I think, from the Syrah coming out. So I always think that's really interesting and a good sign of a fresh cheese. Here we go. And again, you don't need to use the whole block of cheese. If you're just making a board for yourself or, two people, don't feel like you need to cut this whole thing up. And then, I can save something like this and maybe use it for salads, later in the week. One thing I would say here, just kind of for serving size and making sure that enough people get fed, the board that I'm using here, this is quite a large board. And I would say that this could be good for a party. I would almost say like maybe, 12 to 15 guests. This is pretty massive. Not everybody loves cheese, and that's why, it's great to put a couple cheeses on, but then also a variety of other items.
Yeah, we did have a question, Abby, about how many ounces per person on a board do you put for each board.
Yeah,
And so you're kind of talking about it.
definitely. That's a challenging one. It kind of depends. I've heard, it's funny. I went to a British cheese workshop in the UK, and they said 3 ounces per person. And I kind of was thinking, is that enough? I mean, I don't know. I can sometimes eat a lot more than that. So it kind of just depends. I think if you're going to be picking some really unique cheeses, I would probably I'd be on the cautious side. Whereas if like cheddar, that's a party favorite. People are going to love a cheddar. Maybe you can kind of go on the heavier side there. No, that's not like a specific answer, but it's a know your audience a little bit answer. So this next cheese is a Manchego cheese. This one is from Spain. And what's really cool about these cheeses is they kind of come already in a really cool shape. So what I like to do is just, again, to help myself work with this big cheese, I will cut it down a little bit more. And you can see that there's a rind on this. Some people like to eat the rind, some people don't. It's totally up to you. It's acquired taste. But I'll give you guys a little trick here. So one thing that I do is I take a fork like this, and it's going to be hard to see. So I'll pull this up right here so you guys can see it. But I'm basically going to puncture some holes just right here at the top. And what that does is it helps my eyesight, helps me kind of guide where I then need to slice the cheese. So once I've kind of made those holes, let's see if I can get this close enough. You can kind of see that. One thing that's really helpful is it just helps kind of guide where I need to slice. And I think one thing that's really cool about charcuterie boards, when you're making these cheese boards for family and friends, they can almost serve as a centerpiece for your gathering. So you might be busy in the kitchen doing other things and trying to set everything out, but we tend to eat with our eyes first. And I will say that charcuterie boards for me, and whenever I'm hosting, I really find them to be a place where people can come and gather around it and kind of hem and haw. And when you go the extra mile just to spend a little bit more time, putting together some different shapes and whatnot with the cheese, it really can wow guests. And then it just becomes this beautiful centerpiece. Now this is normal, this breakage. If this happens, don't panic. Again, I'm making my little pile for next week. I'll figure out whether I put some manchego in eggs or whatnot. I don't, no cheese gets wasted. So again, I'm just gonna take some of these triangles that I made with the manchego, cut them down even further, thinking about, you know, I'm gonna have lots of guests here and I need to make a pretty big platter. Or even if I didn't have guests, for me, I like to just have a little bit of a smaller piece of cheese. Manchego is definitely one of my favorites. It's one that you can keep for months and months and months. So if you shop frequently at a place like Costco, you can get this cheese for pretty cheap. One thing I like to do with manchego is because it's cut down from a larger wheel, a lot of times the cheese has different price points. So you might pick up one of the wheels and it might say $13. And instead of just throwing it in your cart right away, just grab one more and, you know, look at it and go, huh, this one's $9. So just giving it that extra time and consideration really makes a difference. Again, thinking about eating with your eyes, manchego's a fun one because you can kind of get clever with sticking it off the board, doing some zigzag over here. And then for me, I don't necessarily need to put the manchego all in one place. I'm more than happy to zigzag it over here, just kind of versatile like that. And then one thing too that you can do with manchego is because it is a triangle, you can kind of set them up like this if you prefer. So that will just be almost like a little, it looks like a little bow tie to me. And you can just kind of set that on your board somewhere. One thing I'll say too, if you are watching your purse and your pennies, looking for domestic cheese is really a great way to save for charcuterie boards. So something like this, I'd call out, obviously, a brie with truffles. It's going to be imported from France. You can even see on the label here, it says, you know, a product of France. So that's going to be a lot more expensive than, let's say, a Boursin. This one is, you know, there's a different flavor profile, but if you're looking for two soft cheeses that are spreadable, I would say Boursin is going to be a lot more financially easier when it comes to the checkout lane and getting all of this put together. And this one is from, it's, I think, manufactured in Chicago. So just again, keeping in mind what cheeses might be imported, what cheeses might already be domestic here in the US. And then I would say two really great options, cheddar and then also Gouda. Now, while Gouda is likely imported somewhere like from the Netherlands, I'm sure you guys are familiar with these delicious snacks. So these are some baby bells. And I will show you guys how I just kind of quickly cut these up. And especially if you're in a rush or you're looking to save time, or if you don't want to break the bank on a charcuterie board, these guys are a great way to save money and have something super delicious on your board. And again, with the cheddar, I like to think of cheddar as the confetti of charcuterie boards. So I don't get too worked up about making everything symmetrical, but I think about how easy and how delicious cheddar can be just picking up a cube. We often don't even pair cheddar in our family with anything. We'll just cube it up, like I mentioned, the after school snack, just having a bowl of cheddar cubes. And, you know, it's a bold, delicious, protein packed snack. And again, really quick, easy, cheap, a lot of times from Wisconsin. And then treating this kind of like confetti, just kind of maybe putting it in some different places around the board. And Darla, I'll stop there if there's any other questions about the cheeses I've done so far.
Not cheeses per se, but we did have a question, a couple of questions. One was you talked a little about labeling the cheeses. Do you
Yes.
have a tendency to do that? And then another question is, what is the ratio between how many hard cheeses you put on versus how many soft you put on?
Yeah, so for the first question, I do not tend to label the cheeses. I really enjoy standing around my creation proudly and getting my friends to try some of the unique, kind of weird flavors. But it is helpful, I think, especially depending on what type of cheeses that you're putting. If you can kind of create these little like table card tents, that's always great. Or even a card just right next to the charcuterie board detailing. Another thing we did at my cousin's shower, which was great, her bridal shower, we had just a big piece of butcher paper and we kind of built the board, my dad and I, and then I wrote with Sharpie kind of next to it, you know, Gouda with like an arrow. And so then people kind of got the idea of what cheeses they were kind of tasting and working on. And then as far as the second question, I would say it really depends. This was going back to what I mentioned earlier, thinking about when you're going to be serving a board. So for me, there's quite a few hard cheeses on this board because I'm actually not going to be serving this board until Saturday. It's my godson's birthday, so I'm hoping that I can make this board last until then. So a lot of times the harder cheeses that have been aged for a couple months, they tend to kind of hold up a bit better. And hence why I'm not putting any brie or any of that boursin on this cheese, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Yeah,
Otherwise, would you just say you just kind of do maybe what you think your audience would like best?
definitely. And I would also think about what other kind of accoutrements you want to add, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Um, but let's say you're doing a board for a wine night and you know that there's going to be a lot of other food served, you might not necessarily need to do too many cheeses. And I would maybe just do maybe three max and maybe just do one hard, one soft, and one semi soft. Just again to get that kind of variety and maybe not even thinking about the texture so much, but maybe thinking about, okay, I want to do at least one goat's cheese, one sheep's cheese, and one cow's milk cheese. And that tends to help. The last thing I'll do, this is my last cheese, and a lot of times this one looks a little questionable. So this is a blueberry goat's cheese. And again, similar to blue cheese, I know goat cheese is not everybody's cup of tea. So this one, if you were just to set this on a board, I don't think many people would find it very appetizing, me included. So one trick that I have with these goat's cheeses, number one, seasonally, they come out with some great flavors. But the other thing I'll say about this goat's cheese, it's super helpful if you have a wire cutter. So again, on my website, I have a link to a wire cutter that I use. Because I'm living in London and I'm visiting back at my parents' house, I haven't quite been able to locate where my wire cutter is. So I apologize. So if you don't have a wire cutter, one thing that does help is freezing the goat cheese prior to trying to cut it. So you can freeze goat's cheese, and that's extremely helpful. The other thing I would say is for this one, using a little bit of a thinner knife, that can be helpful and getting that cut, especially through kind of that really thick blueberries we have right here. And just thinking about presentation and how easy it would be for somebody to pick up a piece of this goat's cheese. And again, it's a little bit soft because it's been sitting out. And this is where having it frozen would be a little bit easier. Or again, my my correct knife, or even running this knife through hot water. But one thing that I think is great about this goat's cheese is that you can just kind of even just kind of lay it out on the board. And it's really great to spread on crackers, on baguettes. And it's just a really, really tasty cheese if you give it the chance and not just leave it in a big log on your board.
We had a comment, one of our watchers said, could you use plain dental floss to cut the goat cheese?
Oh my gosh, that is genius. You probably could, as long as it wasn't the plain is the key word there. I think I usually have the minty dental floss, which I don't think would be probably the best approach. But yeah, that's a great idea. Great shout. And I love that. I think just getting creative and not being afraid to try certain things. But you can see from this board, it's a variety of cheeses. We have everything from a nice blueberry goat's cheese to Baby Bell, which is such a classic, to Manchego, to this caramel Gouda cheese, which again I've never tried. I'm really excited to try it, and not getting intimidated, just trying new things, and just also if you're not wanting to try new things, stick to the basics. And just know that you can make anything look creative if you just give it some additional shapes and just try a different way to lay it out. Perfect. Are there any other questions before I move on to talking about the meat, which is step 3?
Yes. Yep. So one question is, how do you keep your cheese from drying out once you put it on the board?
Yes. So great question. I would say one thing is, if you are taking it to someone's house, I know that that probably wasn't the question, but one thing I found is, instead of just wrapping like one layer of saran wrap across the board, actually having it's a two-person job, but picking up the board and having someone help you wrap around the board, and then right before you're about to serve, pull it out. And I would say in the US, only leaving your cheese board out maybe maximum 1 hour prior to guests arriving. And again, when you pick those harder cheeses, they're going to dry out a lot quicker. But one thing that is great about hard cheese is they do pair really well with jams and honey. So manchego, for example, that one to me, it tends to really, really quickly get hard, and kind of almost like it snaps right when you pick it up. That one drizzled with honey is delicious. And so finding ways to kind of combat that dryness, it's really helpful. And I think thinking about maybe where you're storing it. And then another thing is not placing any wet items near the cheese. So doing your best that if you're going to put on some grapes, let's say, not putting a sopping wet pile of grapes next to a cheese, because then it's going to kind of ruin, not only the grapes are going to taste kind of funky, but then it just will impact like the quality and the texture of the cheese.
Right. And then how do people pick up the cheese from your board? Do you have not forks, or how do you do that?
Yeah, so I always like to have a little thing of toothpicks, so that can be next to it. The other thing is, while you're cutting that board, really being intentional again about thinking that someone is going to pick something up potentially with their hands. So again, making these cheddar cubes super easy to pick up. This Toscano cheese, super easy to pick up. But then places like Party City, they do have these adorable, cute little like forks, similar to like if you were to have an event that would maybe have pigs in blanket. Looking in those sections of stores that would maybe have appetizer or kind of specialty. I think I keep saying cookware, but that's not the right word. Specialty kind of serving utensils,
Accessories.
accessories. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Thank you.
We do have a few more, but I'm going to save those for the end and let you go
Yeah,
ahead and fill out that board a little bit more, and we can get the questions answered in a little bit.
great. I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, so the next thing I'm going to talk about, and I'm just really quickly going to grab one more board in here. All my extra boards everywhere. I love this board, by the way. This is my little Iowa board. This is so cute. Um, the next thing I'm going to talk about is meat. So I only have two selections of meat here today. I have a salami and then I also have a prosciutto. So I won't go into too much detail about different kinds of meat, but I will say that it's really easy, especially if you have an Alexa. She's going to think I'm asking her a question. You can ask her questions. You can look up Google just to learn some more about different types of meat, different cuts of meat. For example, this salami that I have here, this specifically is more of like a shoulder. This is an uncured, I think it's an applewood smoked piece of salami. Again, wasn't 100% sure about it, so I did ask her earlier today. But this one is thinly sliced. And what I love about this is we're going to take it and we're going to make what's called a salami river. And this is one of my favorite things to do, and I'll do it a couple times so you can see. But basically what you're going to do is you're going to take your salami, you fold it once like this, and you fold it twice into a little triangle like this. This is where I would take a toothpick and I would stick it in the corner just like this, right? I'll do it again and I will actually repeat it 3 times. So fold, fold, got this little triangle, and I'm going to stick it in the corner like that. So you can see I'm starting to create almost what looks like a little rosette here. And it's really starting to kind of fan out nicely. This one is really fun. When I was making 1,000 cheese board boxes, I was actually timing myself how quickly I could get this little salami rosette done. And what's great about these is, again, a guest could just pick up a whole toothpick and put that on their plate with a piece of cheese or a couple pieces of cheese, or they can just peel off one if they want. But what's nice is I'm going to start placing this just on the board. I'm going to do a couple more just so you guys can see this process. The other thing that's been really popular, people have been creating salami roses. So there's a way to do that if you're interested in kind of creating a more, visual salami rose. That one you can look up on YouTube. There's tons of people that create salami roses. One thing I would find about salami roses is they're great for show, but really when it comes to people at the party eating it, not a lot of people. No one wants to be the rose killer. Nobody wants to be the first person to pick apart the rose. and
No, nobody wants to be responsible, huh?
Right, no one does. Whereas this is a little bit easier. I mean, you can kind of see with this the way it's going, and we're creating that salami river effect. But again, if you didn't want to put them all in a line, you could easily just do some little salami rosettes in different parts of the board. So I can show that too. As I kind of get this snaking through, I probably have enough for maybe 1 or 2 more. The other thing that you can do is you can create prosciutto ribbons. So I'll demonstrate that. If you are new to charcuterie and working with kind of meats and cheeses, I would say that this is more of an intermediate advance. Doing the work with the prosciutto ribbons, I personally struggle with it, and I even find myself not wanting to put prosciutto on a board just because I get so frustrated. It's a really thin piece of meat. Prosciutto comes from the back, the hind legs of a pig, so it can just really be very, very thin and kind of flimsy, if you will. And again, I can demonstrate that. So we have some prosciutto here, and they come on these really, really thin pieces of paper. You can really see that it's pretty small there, but I will, oops, there we go. See, this is a perfect example. I'm gonna try not to get frustrated here, but what you're gonna do is you kind of just fold it in half. You can see I've folded it in half. I still have that paper down just to help me kind of accordion this. And I'm just gonna kind of fold, and I'll pick this up so you guys can see. I know it's a little bit farther away. And again, probably not the best ribbon ever, but you can see that's a way that you can serve prosciutto versus just kind of plopping it down. And for me, I'm just gonna stick a toothpick in and kind of just call it a day. If somebody wants prosciutto, that's great. That's a great way to display it. And we'll move on just to the next kind of items, wrapping up here. So step number 4 is great because this is really where you can lean into the seasons. You can pick items that you like. And again, it's just all about different pairings. So for me, I really love bold flavors with bold flavors. So a cheddar pairs really well with a mustard, whereas a Gouda might pair really well with like a garlic. And again, this is where my website's kind of helpful. I'll talk about these pairings, but again, you can always just do a simple Google search. But I knew that I had a Gouda cheese in my cart this morning. And so when I wheeled by the nut section, I actually picked out some garlic nuts. So I had this garlic cashews that I knew would pair well with the Gouda. And then there's other things, goat cheese pairs well with almonds. If you are in a little bit of a rush or a pinch, one thing I like to do is I actually just like to get trail mix. And I think trail mix is a great way to get the dried fruit with the nuts, sometimes even little bits of chocolate. And I can tend to lean on that, similar to like the Baby Bell trick. If I'm in a pinch and I want to quickly make a charcuterie board, I'll do that. The other thing that's really great to have on boards is fruit. So actually, if you are drinking wine while you are eating your cheese board, you technically are supposed to have a sip of wine, a bite of cheese, and then I think you use the fruit as a cleanser. So I'm not a sommelier. If there's any sommeliers or anyone that knows a lot about wine, that's technically why you have like wine and cheese together. The fruit, whether it be dried or fresh, kind of serves as a palate cleanser in between. So apologies if I got the order wrong with that. But I like to include grapes. I feel like they're kind of always in season in a way. I feel like I haven't kind of ran into a problem yet here in Iowa. And one thing I do is I just put them in bunches and then just kind of stack them up. Again, if there's maybe a little bit of a hole or something like that. I tend to be, again, really mindful to make sure that these are nice and dry. No one really wants soggy grapes or anything like that on their board. So again, just kind of filling in the holes, looking where there might be some space, just like that. And then I just picked some items that, frankly, I just love. So this time of year, they have these little mint dark chocolate stars. Dark chocolate and cheddar are great together. Again, those kind of bold flavors. Something unique. And again, one of my favorite things, these kind of peanut butter cups. I think these are fun. I've never set out a charcuterie board and had these be left on the board. Kind of a little bit unique and random, but I think that they really just serve as kind of a great little addition, especially seasonally. Not that we need any more candy this time of year, but they're easy to stack up. They fill the board nicely. And kind of what I just do is I just kind of find little areas where I want to set them on the board. And then you can kind of see I'm starting to almost run out of space here. So this is where I would then go in maybe with some smaller items like the trail mix. And I'm just, again, being mindful that, maybe I have to carry this to a friend's house or something like that. So I don't want to overload the board too much. I don't want to go overboard, as they say. Um, and again, maybe I decide not to put these on the board, but I'm going to put them on the side of the board. And you can really see it starting to fill up. And this is where it's just kind of fun to take something like trail mix or nuts and just kind of from above, look where maybe I can see the brown wood sticking through, and just kind of put those on the board. Oops. You can see that that's kind of like that. And then step 5, we are going to be garnishing this board. So it doesn't really look like it needs too much, but I did just want to showcase a couple things for you guys, just in case you ever did have some additional space and wanted to add some of these items. Obviously, sticking to seasonal things is always a win. So I specifically have some beautiful rosemary here. So this is something easy. If you have like a little rosemary plant, you can even stick in some rosemary just around the board. It makes it smell really nice. It gives it kind of that festive look. And you can put this on. This would be really like the last step. So even after you've taken your board wherever you're going, just having even like a little bag of rosemary makes all the difference. And one thing I would show you is kiwis. They really brighten up the board. And this I've just drawn with Sharpie around it so you guys can see how I'm going to cut this. It almost looks like Charlie Brown to me. But this is just an easy way. So I'm kind of looking at this. Can't probably see it from your angle, but there's a little bit of a space here. And I'm looking and I'm thinking, okay, what final thing can I do to maybe fill this space and give my board just that pop of color and have it looking a little bit more festive to serve as that centerpiece for my guests that are coming over. I don't typically do this if it's just a board for myself. I should, but this is technically more for something a little bit more elevated. And again, I went around, cut all the way through, and now I have these beautiful kiwis that I can set on my board right there. I think I'm even going to just tuck it right there. And similar to, I would say similar to the trail mix, it's kind of funny. Some of this stuff, it's not there afterwards. It's not meant to be eaten, but it can tend to, someone's bold and somebody tends to take it away. So there you guys have it. Just to recount the steps again. Number 1, pick a board that works well for you. Number 2, pick some delicious cheeses. Number 3, look for some local and great meats. Number 4, pick some accoutrements that pair well nicely with the cheeses you've selected or things that you personally enjoy. And number 5, garnish your board and stick to those seasonal things. But truly, it looks like a work of art and it tastes delicious. So hopefully that was helpful, and happy to answer any questions, Darla, that we have in the chat.
Yes, we do have some. By the way, that board looks fantastic, and I can't believe like 15 minutes ago there was nothing there. So that's crazy to me.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna start with the questions.
Yeah.
Where did you find that Gouda? Because I love Gouda myself. Where did you find that Gouda that you are highlighting?
So that Gouda is from Trader Joe's. And if you live in the West Des Moines area, there's obviously a great Trader Joe's nearby. But also Hy-Vee does a great job sourcing cheeses. So Brooke Champagne at the West Des Moines Hy-Vee on 50th, if you guys know her, go check her out. She's great. But again, I think just keeping an eye out for things like that are seasonal really, really do make a difference.
And so you just have that one cheese that you left in one piece. How
Yeah.
do people eat that? Do they have to break it apart? Is there a knife that you would put out with that?
Yeah, so this knife specifically, you can kind of see on the end that it has this little breakage point that would actually help guests kind of dig into it and cut through it.
Okay.
And again, because it's a specialty cheese, kind of giving people the option to take as much or as little as they want. That really makes a difference. And instead of kind of forcing it upon people and being like, hi, this is a big chunk, if someone's curious, they can kind of come up and just cut a little piece off.
Okay. All right. And how do you serve the brie? Do you serve it in a wedge? What if it's warm? Do you put that in a separate dish or do you put the warm right on the board? How would you serve a brie?
Yeah. So for me personally, I like to get a round brie and I cut it into small triangles. Now that's a big no-no if you are British and you're in my family on my dad's side. They like to leave the brie and they like to leave it out. And it's actually more of like we would call it like a cream cheese. Like they really treat it as a spreadable, like do not cut it. Don't tell me how much to take. And so you could just serve it either on a side dish, you could leave it on the board, but if you leave it on the board, I would tend to put it more in the corner of a board or just on its own a little bit further off to the side, just so you can really like scoop and get as much creaminess and as much brie as you want.
And if it's warm, do you put it on the board too, or would you put it in its own container if it was warmed?
I would probably put it on the side. You'll notice that I don't have any crackers on the board. Um, just similar to the brie, I think sometimes if something is warm or if it's wet, like or if it's supposed to be crunchy, I tend to just keep it on the side. So I would keep probably the brie on the side, and then I like to create like a carb basket, as I call it. So when I talk about garnish, I talk about garnish and carbs. Essentially, that's kind of that fifth step. And I always put together a variety of crackers. So you can see that this is like a cranberry kind of wheat cracker. I have some pita crackers in here. And then I have a baguette. So if I had like a warm brie on the side, this would be a great option to spread that warm brie on.
Do you have napkins or small bowls or plates that people are supposed to, load up, or do they just come and take a bite at a time and then come back and take another bite?
Mhm. Yeah, great question. I would say like little plates are great, but one thing I've done, especially when I have these massive grazing tables, is I've actually ordered on Amazon just little paper cups, almost that you would like serve soup in, that you would find at a deli or something like that. And then also I get these little bamboo. They have these little like tongs. So again, if you're making a bigger board or if germs are an issue, what you can do is you can get those little cups and then those individual tongs, and everybody gets their own set of tongs and their own cup, and then they come and they do that themselves and kind of move on. And that's a good way to make sure that there's not multiple hands. Now, if you're in my family, everyone's just going for it. We don't do tongs, we don't really do plates. A lot of times we just kind of stand around and pop the cheese in our mouth. Probably not the most uh, cleanly approach, but we're all family, and that's my kind of my advice. Just again, knowing your audience and what maybe they would prefer and what they would need.
Okay. If you were going to make this board in advance of a party, and you're kind of doing that if you're going to use it in a couple of days,
Yeah.
do you put it like completely assembled, maybe with the exception of the rosemary? Do you put the fruit on at that time, or would you wait for the fruit? How much of it can you make in advance?
Yeah. So one thing I love to do is just get all of the cheese prepped ahead of time. So I will cut the cheese and I will put them in like Tupperware. I'll either wrap them in saran and then put them in Tupperware, or wrap them in saran and put them in like a big like gallon Ziploc bag. Anything just to kind of like help the time process. And then again, like prepping everything else. I would say like with the salami, that's one thing that can like tend to dry out. So I would probably leave that until the day of. But as far as like prepping all the cheeses, that's good to go. And then just thinking about, okay, what other things could I do in advance? Maybe it's cutting the rosemary down. Rosemary doesn't typically come in these smaller sprigs, you know, so things like that. And then even putting together like the ramekins, like there's no reason that you couldn't have this little mustard already in a ramekin with some wrap around it, or even buying cheese specific wrap. So if you're really getting into the cheese, they do have specific cheese wrap that you can buy to help you save cheese. So even those cheeses that I set aside for later in the week, they have some cheese wrap that I can put on that.
What is your ratio with cheese to meat?
Cheese to me, I
Do you
am more of
do
a
more than two meats at a time?
I personally don't. I'm a cheese gal. I love the cheese. So I typically do two meats max. And then cheese can vary from like three cheeses to like six cheeses. So for me personally, I'm more into the cheeses than the meats.
Okay, great. And I think that most of the questions are done. You've given us a great session. Oh, no, as soon as I said that, let me see. When you're taking a board, could you have everything in containers and then assemble it at the house you're going to, or would
Yes.
that be considered bad form?
No, because I live in London, I do that often. I have to take everything pre-assembled in a bag. I get on the tube and I go, and then I make it at the house. So that's more than appropriate. I think just giving the host a heads up to make sure that they know that they need an area in your kitchen. But if you have everything else ready to go, that's a great option as well.
Great. And let me see. Was there anything else? I just wanted to go ahead and let people know again that website is One Board Gal. That's ONEBORDGAL.com, oneboardgal.com. You can also email Abby. She very graciously has said if you had, we're doing a cheese board next week and you had a question about something, she's very happy to give you a little attention and help you with that if you want to email her. That email again is also very easy. It's oneboardgal@gmail.com. I know we were just talking, Abby and I, before this session about her website, which is wonderful. And she just posted, actually on her blog, the top December charcuterie must-haves. So if you want to know more, about things she's talked about here or more of her other great knowledge, please go and check out that website. Sign up for her newsletter. I surely did because I'm excited to see what she is going to be doing next. But thank you so much for joining us tonight. Again, as I put in the chat, we will have a recording that we will send you a link to you so that you can access. Abby is going to share that on her website as well. But I hope that you're all having a wonderful holiday season. This helps you get a little bit more in the holiday spirit, and maybe you can wow some people with your newfound talent. But if not, it's just fun sometimes to learn something new. So we thank you so much for joining us tonight, Abby. And everybody, please have a happy holiday season and a good evening. Thank you.
Yes. Thank you guys. Send me your creations if you make any.
Here
I'd
we
love to.
go.
Thank
Wonderful. All right. Thanks, everybody. Good evening.